Hi everyone, my name is Heitor and I'm here to show you the results of Serokell's latest work on the Motoko extension for Visual Studio Code. Motoko is a simple high-level language for the Internet computer. The Internet computer lets you run full applications entirely on-chain, backend logic, storage, databases, and even the web front-end. Its canisters behave like high-capacity, upgradable smart contracts with fast execution and predictable costs. So you don't need AWS, servers, or external hosting to build scalable apps. We've added a couple of new features and made various improvements that will benefit developers using the Motoko language server to write on-chain applications. The first improvement exports Motoko AST with structured types annotations for every node. If you're a Node Motoko user, you might have noticed that only .e expressions had type annotations, but now parsing with types will show types for every node. Here I have a very simple script that parses the input file with types and outputs it to the console. And here I have a simple Motoko file defining a function that simply returns its input as the output. Running this script shows the EST with type wraps consistently appearing. For example, I might scroll up and see the type representation for a varied node. The language server now supports signature help. This means that users will now be able to see hints for function parameters as they are being typed. In this example, I can type example, and I will see the two parameters for this function. First, of type net, and second, of type text. We've refined completions, and they will now display the types and documentations for each symbol. The kind for each completion item will be more accurate as well, meaning the icon you see will better represent what the item is about. Here, for example, I may type name and see the type and documentation for this variable. Moreover, completion items now take the scope into consideration. You'll not see identifiers that are not relevant to the current scope. For example, here I have let x equals to defined, and I see two completion items, one for defined in else and defined in function, but not defined in if, which is not in scope. While searching for definitions of references, fields in records will now be searched. Previously, only classes, modules, and actors would be searched. Now, in this object expression, I may look for this field and find all of its references. Previously, only a couple of capabilities had tests in the VS Code Motoko repository. We've added tests for every capability, so contributors to the extension may make contributions with better guarantees that they are not breaking existing code. For example, here are new test suites for code action, for document symbol, and for workspace symbol. The extension will now be more lenient and attempt to accumulate diagnostics related to type errors in the source file. This allows language server capabilities that rely on types to work despite errors. For example, completions and hovers previously didn't work for locally defined modules, but they now should be visible. Here we have a declaration with a type mismatch, but besides this, we are still able to see its type as well as its documentation. The language server now supports renaming symbols. For example, here we have person.name. And after pressing F2 to rename, we may see that all references to name have been changed, including its declaration. Last but not least, the extension is now able to automatically detect the mock.js version for a project, download, and cache it. Here we set mock 0.16.3, and opening a Motoko file shows in logs that this version has been downloaded. With this, the extension will now use a relevant version of Motoko rather than a fixed version for every project. Our changes to make these improvements possible touch three repositories: Motoko, where the compiler is hosted, Node Motoko, which provides the Node package, and VS Code Motoko, where the language server is developed. For the compiler, in the Motoko repository, three main changes were performed. We've added a new way to serialize the Motoko AST, which helps to improve the performance to efficiently export types for nodes. We fixed a bug where some regions for fields were incorrect, which provided better accuracy for finding references and renaming operations. Enabling recovery, which previously only enabled syntax error recovery, now enables the type error recovery. We also recover from errors while parsing identifiers, which allow for better parsing, which is relevant to allowing recovery from errors in dot expressions. For Node Motoko, these changes are tiny. Besides inheriting properties for ID nodes, we also inherit them for Xfield nodes. For VS Code Motoko, where the bulk of our work lies, we've performed the following changes. First, we added a handler for signature help. The handler for completions has a smarter algorithm that will consider the scope in which the identifier was declared, as well as documentation and type. And the navigation module now looks into more places to find for references, such as inside the records. The test suite for the extension now contains tests for missing capabilities: code action, workspace symbol, and document symbol. A new handler for prepare rename, which checks the validity of a rename, was added, as well as a handler for rename, which performs a project-wise rename of a symbol. The code now tries to read the mock version from the mob's toolchain. Failing that, it will use the version from DFX cache. The code also keeps just the 5 most recent versions, deleting older ones. And new tests were created to support those changes. And this concludes our brief code walkthrough. We hope you enjoyed the new features we've added. Thanks for watching.